Here we are in section 1. This section is about the key concepts of direct, plan, and improve. In this section, particularly in 1.1, we will understand the key terms of direct, plan, and improve. And terms like direction, planning, improvement, operating model, methods, risks, and scope of control. Methods mean understand what does a method mean? What is the definition of a method? So firstly, direction. On the left, we have here direction means leading, conducting, or guiding someone or ordering something, setting and communicating the vision, purpose, objectives, and guiding principles for an organization or team. It may include leading or guiding the organization or team towards the objectives. So some of the keywords here are the vision, purpose, objectives, setting the guiding principles for the entire organization or for a specific team, depending on the level of the director, and guiding them towards the objectives to be achieved either at a team level, a department level, a service level, an organization level. When multiple people are involved in business activities, coordination and collaboration are crucial. Because organizations are usually hierarchical, direction is often provided from the top down. Direction helps to create and shape an action plan, clarifies expected outcomes, define appropriate guiding principles, provide sufficient clarity but allow some flexibility for people to be creative, so that all the time instructions may demotivate people, therefore they need to be given some flexibility within certain boundaries. Authority to direct may be formal or informal, respect the ability of those being directed, ensures two-way communication, and should be in alignment with objectives. When I worked myself as a director for monitoring of systems and application, I used to define the goal for my whole team. And I would create a high level action plan so that people understand where we are heading. What is the purpose of monitoring the systems? Whom does it benefit? What kind of issues does it prevent for the organization? A bank, for example. And however, the instructions may not be extremely detailed, except in certain areas where breaches of certain activities may lead to business disruptions. That is where I would create very detailed policies and instructions. On the other hand, I would allow the people to create their own instructions, more detailed procedures. But then I would have somebody, including myself, review the procedures and then sign off on the standard operating procedures so that everything is working properly. And while all these activities are going on, as a director, my job was to provide a movement towards the goal. So if the team is not moving towards the goal, including myself, then all of us will turn our direction towards the goal. So examples of director's job could be, as goal setting could be, building some new capability to develop some products, building capability to deliver new types of services, or maybe improving processes and procedures and practices by which customer satisfaction will be improved, or even things like how to motivate the employees for better job satisfaction. For example, giving them job growth opportunities or job enhancement opportunities. So those are some of the examples of direction. Continuing with direction, any changes should be communicated so that team members understand what the changes are, why they are necessary, and whether they need to alter their ways of working to align with them. It is possible sometimes that within a goal, some of the sub goals may change. So for example, when monitoring systems and applications, there may be a need to monitor some additional types of application or to monitor them in a different way. So there's a slight change in the direction. So that should be communicated clearly to the team, along with why it is being done and who are the stakeholders who are expecting this change, so that people can contribute to the success of the new direction. One approach to providing direction is evaluate, direct, and monitor, in which direction and behaviors are defined based on agreed objectives and performance is monitored against these. Which means goals, objectives, purposes, etc. are defined. Measurement parameters are also defined. And from time to time, the performance is measured towards the progress of the progress towards the goal. So that is known as evaluation. So first create the direction, then monitor and evaluate and make corrections if required. The success of direction at all levels can be viewed as the degree to which each group understands their objectives. Each individual understands their expected contribution. These groups and individuals act in accordance with the direction they have received. A simple way to check if people are being directed properly or not is to ask them, do you know what is your role in this team? Do you know what is the goal of this team? Do you know what is the amount of contribution which is expected from you? And what is the contribution the team is after? These kind of questions, if answered properly, will imply that the team has been given clear direction and it is also being monitored. Or you could ask them also, do you know how your performance is being monitored by your management? Yeah. And the director himself or herself could do these things to check them whether they know them or not, so that the way of direction can also be improved. And the measurements will also indicate whether the direction is okay or not. So not only asking questions, but looking at the metrics, the measurements will give indications of improper direction or even improper performance in spite of proper direction. Next is planning. Planning is arranging a method of achieving an end or creating a detailed program of action. Everybody knows what planning is. Even people who are not into IT, who are not into work, also know what is planning. Unless the objectives and actions of different groups are planned and aligned, their desired outcomes will likely not be achieved. Even if they are achieved, poor coordination usually results in missteps, restarts, and rework. Which means that without planning, if something is done, then it may appear that things are going on okay, but there may be errors, may have to restart something, some rework may be necessary, or some steps might be missed. Of course, it is required to plan, but how detailed the plan should be another question. Should the planning be in so much depth that there is no room for creativity, or should the planning be very superficial that the plan itself is not clear? Thorough planning creates a shared understanding of how work will be organized and managed, allowing contributors to understand their roles and to coordinate and collaborate efficiently and effectively. Generally, there are kickoff meetings when the plans are ready. In the kickoff meeting, a project manager or a leader will communicate the various responsibilities for the various people. And of course, the plan would have been made in consultation with those specialists and team members only. Once an organization has a direction and a goal, they must decide how they will get there. So it is the basic of planning. What is the goal and how do we get there? Is it a simple list of things to do? Maybe, but sometimes a simple to-do list may not be sufficient. We need to understand maybe dependencies, how much extra time is allowed for certain activities, how much extra money is allowed for certain activities, what are the risks of certain activities. All this should go into the plan. So these need a plan. Plans are always important, but particularly so in large organizations because plans improve coordination. In smaller startup companies, people may work in a different manner, more informal, undocumented methods, but in large corporations, a lot of written review, double review, checkpoints are done before a plan is agreed to. Following a plan helps to avoid wasting time and reduces risks. So examples of planning could be project plans, transition or handover plans, operational readiness plans, software development plans, etc. And just one key point here is too much planning may prevent people from thinking on their feet. They may lose their creativity. And too little planning may create a situation where people may not know what to do at all. And let us look at that a little bit more on this slide. Planning improves coordination and helps to reduce waste and risk, increases order. The word risk is coming up here. Results in clear, focused actions, meaning the planning results in clear, focused actions that proceed efficiently towards the achievement of the desired outcomes. It should be in alignment with the objectives. So in case of a project or a software development, the objective or the goal should be clear. What kind of product is being developed? What is the timeline? What is the cost, etc.? Who are the resources or the resource count numbers, etc. And by having such plan, the actions are clear and focused so that the outcomes have a higher likelihood of being achieved. Detailed planning decisions will be easier when the planners understand why an action is being taken. The moment an action is identified, the planners will know why they need to do that. So they may sometimes reject a specific action because it is not required. It may be superfluous. On the other hand, they may be trying to identify the more important actions. Note that some risk may be positive also. Like more people will use the service than expected. Yeah, a project is trying to release a new product and it's been marketed and being deployed and released, and it may happen that more users are attracted to the service or product. Too much planning can delay action and make it hard to deal with the unexpected. Imagine the planning is going on for weeks and weeks, and people are still waiting for the plan to be approved. There is no execution happening yet. It could be a waste of time and resources who have been already onboarded. And because risk cannot be fully eliminated, no matter how much planning is done. But it is important to identify the relevant risks and the key risks. Too little planning can result in rework, mistakes, waste. Planning should be iterative with continual re-evaluation and adjustment, meaning plans should evolve. If you have a large complex assignment, we could do the initial plan in a few days time, and then as and when more information is available, that plan could be refined further into the next version and sign off can be obtained on that plan, so that the execution can start with the high level plan. And sometimes they have the concept of planning horizon or planning distance. If I have a 1 year long assignment or a project, but if I know only about the next 3 months, then I would be able to plan in detail only for the next 3 months. Beyond the 3 months, there is no visibility as to the information required for planning. So why to spend too much time for planning beyond the 3 months, except at a very high level? But for the near term, plan in detail, and for the far away, maybe better to plan at a higher level, while still keeping the goal in mind and listing some milestones to reach the goal. Planning occurs at multiple levels: strategy and strategic planning, tactics and tactical planning, operations and operational planning. At the moment, please just make a note of these three. We will learn more about this later in this course, along with examples. What does strategy and strategic planning mean? And what do the others also mean? Yes. Generally, a quick view here: strategic planning, is the top management planning, which is about longer term, generally at a higher level. But nowadays, in the digital era, strategy plans also become very short term or near term, because strategies are continuously required to be changed because of the dynamics of the business. So we can redefine strategic planning as more as a top level planning, and tactical is the medium level, more the tactics to be used to achieve the strategy, some methods to be used to achieve the strategy. And operations are the detailed activities for specific tactics. So with some examples, we will cover this afterwards in the course. Next comes the topic of improvement. Next is improvement. We have covered direction, planning, and now it is improvement. That will make up the DPI. On the right, we have the definition of improvement: a deliberately introduced change that results in increased value for one or more stakeholders. Improvement is done mainly for the value increase for one or more stakeholders by doing some change. Improvement is the act of enhancing something in value or quality, means making something better. Improvement is a critical component of any successful organization. Identifying and acting upon opportunities for improvement ensure that the organization grows and remains successful over time. Improvement relies on comparison. Something can only be improved in comparison to another state. There can be no change to outcomes without improving some aspect of the current state, which means there is always comparison going on. How are we today as compared to what it was before? Do we need to, and what do we want to be? Or how are others doing it in a better way? It is always a comparison before the decision to improve comes up. It is also rare to start something from nothing. So everything we do is improvement. Unless we are starting something from the basic scratch, everything is improvement. In fact, even starting from scratch is generally done for some improvement, because somebody else is doing it or because there is a need to change from the current status quo. Everyone is responsible for continual improvement. This is a concept we have noted at the foundation level also. However, there could be certain dedicated leads for improvement who set the direction, but everyone is required to contribute with ideas for improvement and participate in improvements as per their given roles and responsibilities. Any part of the service value system can be improved. Remember the 5 components of the service value system, which means improve itself can be improved. Governance, practices, and so on. As a service provider, the improvement of services can be expected to be a central focus. But that could also imply improvement in service performance, profitability, adoption of the service by the user community. Not only the service to be improved, meaning the performance, but the profit and increasing the user base. So there are various creative options for improvement rather than sticking to the traditional ways of improvement. But we have to know and agree what is better in order to improve. There should be a clear understanding of what is the meaning of better. A meaning of better could be a better software development methodology, or a better team composition, or a better team competency. The success of improvements can be measured from macro and micro perspectives. Let us look at what these mean. Macro perspective. This is at the higher level. Micro means smaller level. Macro, the organization's commitment to improvement by learning and acting on lessons. Commitment to organizational learning, including contributions to improvements in job descriptions and performance. So which means there is a culture of improvement at the macro level. You could ask questions like, do lessons learned meetings happen, like retrospectives happen, or the lessons learned actions being taken? So that is the first point. Are actions taken based on the lessons reports? Are they being circulated for future use as a commitment to learning? And does performance measurement tech appraisals, do they include the recognition of the improvement work? These are the questions to ask to conclude whether there is a macro perspective or not. On the other hand, the micro perspective is about individuals. So one could take account of how many people are contributing to improvements, how many people are being involved in improvements, and are self-motivated for that. That is a micro perspective. Operating model. Operating model is defined here on the right. It is a conceptual and or visual representation of how an organization co-creates value with its customers and other stakeholders, as well as how the organization runs itself. So it's a visual mapping of how value is created or co-created and how the organization runs itself. So for example, it could be a business model of the organization. How does it run its business through the various departments and operations being carried out? And it also includes, for example, the service value chain. You might recollect that the service value chain with the 6 activities like planning, etc., is also an operating model to co-create value by producing products and services. There are other operating models also. We'll take a look at them briefly in just a moment. The ITIL service value chain is an operating model. It covers all activities needed to create, deliver, and manage products and services. It allows the organization to examine complex structures and dynamics, divides the complex systems into simpler subsystems. So another example of an operating model could be how the various departments in an organization are working together. The way they work with each other is an operating model because they are trying to respond to customer needs and internal needs. You see, it says how the organization runs itself, which means how they are responding to internal needs and ways of working also. And the operating model will require the adaptation of certain practices, certain management practices. For example, doing performance appraisals of people or performing risk management, doing some planning, creating improvements, performing procurement, managing HR, performing marketing, engineering activities, design activities. All these are comprised in the operating model. Here we have an example of a business model. A business model is also a kind of an operating model. How does the business run itself, and how does the business co-create value for its stakeholders and customer? This is a very popular business model canvas from Alexander Osterwalder. There is a link provided to you in the supporting material, which you will find in the learning management system also. Here they define the problem of the business, the problems of the business, the solutions, the unique value proposition of the business. What is the unfair advantage that business or company has? What are their customer segments? What are their revenue streams? What is their cost structure, the key metrics, and their channels, yeah, like marketing, distribution channels, etc. If you wish to know more about this, you may want to look at this link. While that picture was more clear, here it is more about knowing the link. This is an empty canvas. Yeah? And at this link, you will find such templates and examples also. Another example of an operating model is the Verism or Verism. It is a service management approach or an operating model for the digital age. This is from the IFDC, International Foundation for Digital Competencies. And it means value-driven, evolutionary, responsive, and integrated service management. You can find more information at this link here. Verism considers various management practices to build an operating model for a business. And it considers ITIL as one of the management practices. You may have other management practices like Agile, metrics and performance management, and project management, asset management, yeah, all those or COBIT, control objectives in IT, and many other standards or frameworks like DevOps. These are various management practices. And it is left to the organization to pick and choose those management practices in order to define their operating model. So Verism goes in that direction. Next, we have the concept of method. A method is a way, technique, or process of doing something. Methods are structured and systematic. Methods are used for structured and systematic work. It can include tools, processes, etc. An organization can allow the use of multiple methods for the same work. Decision may be based on policy or guidelines, meaning the decision to select a method. Yeah, it can be based on policies, guidelines, or personal choice of the person doing the work. An individual may prefer a certain method if they think that is required at that moment. It could be faster, more cost effective. When more than one method is available for a task, the person doing the work should either follow the direction of their organization to select the method or decide for themselves which method to use. Maybe there is a better method. So examples of methods from my experience, like risk estimation methods, risk identification methods, or a software development methodology, life cycle methodology, or even a testing or a quality check method. These are some examples of method. So depending on the situation, we may use a specific way of quality testing, like performing a review or performing more evaluation in a different way. For example, in software development, they use something known as pair programming. Pair programming is a review method. One person is writing the program, another person is looking at the screen, what the other person is writing. People work in pairs. And only one line is written by one person. After that person has written one line, then the second person will write the second line, and other person will give the feedback on that line. So these are various methods are available in the industry, and the organization decides which method is required based on various stakeholder needs. Scope of control. A person's scope of control is the extent of the area or areas or activities over which the person has authority to direct the actions of others or define the required outcomes. So it's about the span of control. How much control does the person have? Yeah? No, it could be on a number of people. It could be on a certain collection of tasks, yeah? And or certain objectives. Note that ITIL guidance is not just for managers. Guidance can be applied at many levels. Non-managers also can use the ITIL guidance. Corporate leaders have very wide authority. Therefore, the scope of control of the corporate leaders is very wide. Everyone has some authority. Even individuals who may at the lowest level will have some authority to perform some task. We all have influence as well as control. A person who is an expert may have a lot of influence, but they may not be able to control unless they have the authority to control. Yeah? But those who influence will be giving good inputs to set up the controls. Scope of influence is wider than scope of control. For example, you may be given a certain authority and you have a certain scope of control. But because of your expertise, you can influence many other areas outside your scope of control. Yeah, that's the meaning of this. May need to find ways to influence things beyond our control. Yeah, so that's a natural. How can we, if I'm being given a role, how can I influence other things in the organization which will make it more convenient for me in my role, or which will improve meeting my objectives in my role? So these need to be thought about. Influence may be more effective and sustainable than simply commanding others. Yeah, this is good. Generally, good leadership is demonstrated when somebody is able to influence with their expertise or their other styles of working rather than just showing authority. Authority will always work based on the authority given to the person in the organization, but influence may create more followers rather than authority. Examples of scope of control could be a person may have authority to approve a certain amount only, or a person may be a manager for only a specific group of people or for a specific function like a service desk group of people or a function. The next topic is risk. Risk is a very commonly understood term, nothing new. It is a possible event that could cause harm or loss or make it more difficult to achieve objectives. It can also be defined as the uncertainty of outcome. Risks exist everywhere, must be actively managed to ensure objectives can be achieved. Sometimes people may identify too many risks. Is it really required? Only the relevant risks which can impact objectives should be identified. If there are risks which do not impact objectives, there is no need to list them and take action on them. Direction without considering risk is unlikely to succeed. Risk management is always important when providing direction. Understand the risks, taking actions to mitigate the risks. If risks are not properly understood, teams could be directed to undertake projects that are certain to fail. Teams will go on and do their tasks without knowing the risks, and the risks will happen one after another, and then the projects will fail. Another key thing here is if team members notice the risks but do not see evidence of preventative actions from the management, they may lose confidence in their project, increasing the likelihood of failure. For example, let's say team members feel that a certain procedure is not good. It is very risky to use this for their activities when designing or creating a new service. And if no action is being taken to reduce the risk, for example, by improving the process, then they may lose confidence. They will think that anyway, this process is not going to work. There will be risks in this. And even if the risk does not surface, their motivation will go down. This is a very interesting thing about risk, which I found that improper risk management can demotivate staff. Plans that don't manage risks are incomplete and increase the chances of errors, rework, and project failure. Therefore, there are several risk management certifications also in the market. Improvements that don't understand risk are unlikely to succeed. Even when improvement projects need to have their risk identified and actions taken on those risks. Some examples of risks could be a likely drop of team morale, yeah, maybe because of improper trainings provided or improper management or lack of um, incentives from the management and too much work to be done. Or it could be because of changes to prices may impact the cost of a service. Prices of resources in the market may impact the cost of a service, and therefore the number of buyers for the service may also drop if it is an expensive service. A positive example of risk could be more users likely to use a service than expected. that brings us to the end of this 1.1 in the syllabus with some of the basic terms here. We will look at some questions. We'll practice some sample questions on this topic from the Axelos sample paper. Let us practice some questions on the learning so far. But before that, let me show you a sample question paper for DPI. As mentioned before, the exam lasts for 1 hour and 30 minutes. And if you are a non-English native speaker, you get approximately 15 minutes more. This is a sample question. We need not attempt it right now. This is just to show you how the questions are. So the questions could be like this. As you can see, this is a type of a situational question, and it is asking which of the below would be the correct one as per the learnings. And I will take you to the relevant questions based on the learnings we have had so far. Here is the first question for you based on the learning so far with the basic terms. Question number 7 from the sample paper. What describes improvement? Formally documenting statements of management expectations. Enhancing the ability of a service or product to deliver value. Creating a method of achieving a service provider goal. Providing guidance to the service provider organization. Let us look at the answers one by one. Option A, formally documenting statements of expectations of management. This is the description of the policy creation. We will see afterwards that a policy is a formally documented management expectations and intentions used to direct decisions and activities. Option B is to enhance the ability of a service or product to deliver value. This is correct. This is an example of an improvement, because improvement is something which is a deliberately introduced change that results in increased value for one or more stakeholders. Option C, creating a method for achieving a service provider goal. This is a planning. Planning means arranging a method of achieving an end or creating a detailed program of action. Option D, providing guidance to the service provider organization. This is direction, isn't it? Because direction is leading, conducting, guiding someone, or ordering something, which means defining and communicating the vision, the purpose, the goals, objectives, even guiding principles of the organization or for a single team. It can also include leading or guiding the organization or team towards its objectives. Therefore, the correct answer is B. We now continue with section 1.2, understand the differences between the key concepts. So for example, understand the difference between vision and mission, difference between strategy, tactics, and operations, governance, compliance, and management. What do these three mean? And the difference between policies, controls, and guidelines. So that's what we see here in 1.2. 4 sets of terms to differentiate. Vision. Vision, a defined aspiration of what an organization would like to become in the future. Mission, the overall purpose and vision of the organization. Vision helps to maintain enthusiasm and clarifies why things happen. Teams focus their efforts on achieving a defined mission. The purpose. Mission is the overall purpose, whereas vision is the aspiration of the future. Though we see the word vision here in the mission as well, we'll look at some examples to get some clarity. Both vision and mission can be publicized externally, meaning it can be made known to outside the organization also. Generally, the vision statements are future states. As we see this word future, that is important. And the future, it's a verifiable statement of the future. And it's also about the benefits. Sometimes in the vision, you can even include constraints. Yeah? And generally, vision is for a broader range of stakeholders, not for one person or for a group of people. And it should be something desirable and easy language, easy to understand, and something compelling, which will create some inspiration to go after the vision. Yeah? So, for example, building a healthier community. We are here to build a healthier community. We are here to delight customers. So these are simple words which create some kind of energy and enthusiasm inside people and stakeholders. But the mission is about the purpose and how it is being done. Simple. So it should include the how to do, when it will be done, and why it is being done. So for example, we are an organization who provides solar energy solutions for environmental sustainability. It clearly mentions how something is being done. The vision is kind of environmental sustainability, but the vision statement could be written as building we are here to build a sustainable universe, yeah, or a planet. And the mission will be by providing solar energy solutions. So that's how we can differentiate between the aspiration of the future and the purpose and how it will be done. Next is the concept of strategy, tactics, and operations. Strategy, a broad approach or course of action defined by an organization for achieving its objectives. A broad approach. Tactics, the specific methods by which the strategy is enacted. Operation, the routine running of and management of activity, product, service, or other configuration item. Yeah, so these are three things. Strategy can be defined at multiple levels, but must logically cascade down and be tied to objectives. Strategies can be there at various levels. So the top level strategy can cascade to the middle level strategy and to the downward strategies. But they should be all be linked to each other, bottom up or top down. Tactics can be altered or abandoned if found unsuccessful in enacting the strategy. Um, Tactics often include standard ways of working like project planning, templates, frameworks. These are all tactics. Operations may include predictable, repetitive work with well-known procedures and managing unique situations. This has to be in line with strategy and tactics. Operations mean when the day-to-day work is going on, there will be multiple different situations for which planning can be done, but not all of it can be planned. We'll also look at other terms like policy, control, and guidelines. What do they mean? We have examples of planning at various levels which help understand the meaning of strategy, tactics, and operations. A hotel group with an objective of being the global leader in business and leisure lodging services adopts a strategy to stabilize their position in the American and European markets, then to move aggressively into the Asia Pacific market. This is a broad approach to achieve their objective. Yeah, so it's a strategy. Tactics. Ensure the guest satisfaction. This is one method which will help to meet the strategy. There will be other tactics as well to stabilize the position in the market and to move aggressively to the other markets. Without this tactic, they may find it difficult to meet the strategy. But then how to work on the tactic of guest satisfaction? They need some operational activities. Collect the complaint information, analyze data, select areas to improve, create a campaign, like a campaign to build awareness or that improvements are being made, and so on. We now move on to governance. Direction comes from many parts of the ITIL SVS, but the governance component typically plays a particularly prominent role. In the SVS, we have the other components like practices, a service value chain, continual improvement model, all that. And the guiding principles. Those are the other four components apart from governance. What is governance? It is the means by which an organization is directed and controlled. Direction is a key element of governance. Every organization is directed by a governing body, a person or group of people who are accountable at the highest level for the performance and compliance of the organization. Highest level, note that keyword. Governance includes the establishment of policies and the continual monitoring of their proper implementation by the governing body. Organizational governance evaluates, directs, and monitors all of the organization's activities, including those of service management. We see the EDM, evaluate, direct, and monitor. This summarizes governance. Usually governance is treated or explained as a EDM model, evaluate, direct, and monitor model. An example of evaluation could be evaluating the opportunities in the market or internal opportunities. For example, can um, the service management team move from level 1 to level 2 work and get more customers? If my organization can tell the customer that we currently do level 1, we can take your level 2 work and combine into a single more effective team and save your money, then they may be interested. So that is an opportunity which needs proper analysis and selling. Direction is how to do that, how to exactly create the plan for combining the teams and all that. And monitor means, is it working well? Once the teams are established to do that, to move from level 1 to level 2 work, then is it working well or not? Yeah? But then for that, certain policies, rules, procedures have to be created. Therefore, governance can be done at various levels. At the operational level, there may be very detailed activities and procedures. At the top level, they may be looking at the customers, the benefit the customer and the provider are receiving from this new way of working. Generally, in governance, people get to hear about new initiatives being taken by their organization, or people will hear about policy changes, or sometimes see changes in the work performance measurement systems. So whenever these things are happening, it means the governance is being done. Yeah, new initiatives coming up, changes to the work performance measurement system, policy changes. Yeah, these are all indicators that governance is going on. Or sometimes there may be new procedures about work to be done in a new manner. This is all because of the governance from the top level. There must be some new direction coming from the top, which is percolating or cascading down to the lower levels, and eventually the employees are following new ways of working. Yeah, so that's governance. Next, we have compliance. Please note this carefully now. We will have 3 terms or 4 terms which have to be noted very carefully for the exam. These terms are compliance, policy, control, and guidelines. There are subtle differences between compliance, policy, and control, yeah, in particular. Guidelines is more easy to understand, but compliance, policy, and control may be a bit tricky. So please, let's look at them in a careful manner. Compliance. The act of ensuring that a standard or a set of guidelines is followed, or that proper, consistent accounting or other practices are being employed. For the exam, you have to know both, that ensuring that a standard or guidelines are being followed, or other practices are being employed, like accounting or other practices. Consistently, they're being done. For governance to be effective, compliance to applicable laws and regulations must be ensured. So governance will include the compliance aspect. And compliance means ensure that the laws and regulations are being followed. Guideline standards are being followed. Accounting or other practices are being followed. Additionally, governance mechanisms are used to ensure compliance to other established policies. Now, while we are saying that governance is about defining the policy, and for governance to work properly, there should be compliance or ensuring things. But governance is also used to comply with other policies, yeah, also, maybe other policies. While governance and compliance have specific meanings, management covers a broader activity. When somebody says, I'm managing something, they may mean a lot. But when they say, I'm working on compliance, I'm working on governance, it has specific meanings. An example of compliance could be, because compliance means ensuring something. So for example, if we implement ISO 27000, which is an information security management guidance, that can ensure that security management will happen for information. So ISO 27000 is a compliance example. Or if a monthly regulatory report has to be sent, then the act of sending that report is compliance. Yeah? There is a need to send a monthly regulatory report, and ensuring that the report is sent is compliance. Yeah? Next, we have management, which is a much easier term. The application of skill or care in the conduct, control, or supervision of something. It's more about how to do things rather than asking questions like why to do, what to do, which is leadership. Good management should result in effective and efficient operational activity, confident and competent employees, and the achievement of defined goals and objectives throughout the organization. Generally, people say, I have a good manager. Our management is very good. We are happy with the management. Yeah? Which means things are effective, efficient, good confidence. Employees are um, competent because of good management. However, one of the concerns of good management is the adherence to directions established through the organization's governance structure, including compliance to policies, laws, and regulations. Which means managers exist because governance has to be followed. Managers ensure that things are being done as required by the governance. So adherence is a key word, compliance, adherence to the policies, uh, uh, bringing the controls, establishing the controls so that the compliance happens. Note the word, I brought the word control. A control is placed to ensure compliance. If there is no control, the compliance may be violated. Yeah? The term management is also used to refer to people in a management role. Yeah? A manager is doing management. Next, we have policies, controls, and guidelines. Policy: formally documented management expectations and intentions used to direct decisions and activities. While compliance is the act of ensuring adherence, policy is the expectation of what should be complied with. An example of a policy could be external websites are not allowed to be browsed. The company says no external websites allowed to be browsed, or maybe certain sites are blocked. That is the policy. Yeah. Now, blocking the site is not a policy. Blocking the site is a control. But policy is that the following websites cannot be accessed. These websites only can be accessed. Yeah? Now, note that policy should not conflict. We will see that point coming up afterwards. That one policy should not conflict another, then people will get confused. Control: a means of managing a risk or ensuring that a business objective is achieved or a process is followed. So control is a way to achieve compliance to a policy. I think this is a good statement. Control is a way to ensure that the policy is working, is a policy is adopted, yeah, and control ensures the compliance. Guideline. So example of control, by the way. Because it is a way to ensure compliance, earlier we said ISO 20000 is a compliance requirement. It will ensure because it will ensure the information security management. But how do we establish control on that compliance need? We can do an audit. Auditing whether ISO 27000 is being implemented or not is a good control for that compliance requirement. So while compliance is to ensure, without control, that ensuring may not occur. And another way to control that ISO 27000 is complied with is an evidence of the monthly report having been sent. Maybe a report has to be sent as part of the ISO, or maybe some other regulatory requirement. So those are controls. Somebody can ask, okay, there was a compliance need to send a monthly report. Show me the report. That is a control, yeah, which can ensure the compliance. If it is not sent, there'll be some disciplinary action or something so that it will be sent the next time. So control helps to ensure that something is followed. Guideline: a recommended practice that allows some discretion in its interpretation, implementation, or use. This is more simple. It is not a mandate, but just a guideline. For example, use a certain planning template, or use a certain risk identification methodology or a risk analysis methodology. And these are all examples of guidelines. So in the case of the policy of external websites not being allowed to be browsed, other examples of control to ensure compliance to certain policies could be Training the employees. When the employees are trained, it is a control because that could ensure compliance. And sometimes you may have to fill in, a person may have to fill in some fields in a form mandatorily. That could be a control. By filling those forms as a control, certain things may be ensured. Or if I'm a manager and an employee is asking me for a certain software, and the policy may say that the software cannot be given to the employee without approval of the manager. Therefore, I must approve it. So, so the control is the approval from the line manager, because the policy is that approval is necessary. And when I'm approving from my side, I'm complying with the policy. So controls help to comply with policy. And sometimes we may have that a system administrator, yeah, should have undergone some training. There may be a policy within a certain service team that sysadmins should be undergoing training to install software. And when the training is completed, then we are ensuring compliance. So the policy is that there should be training. The control is that training is to be done. And once the training is done, the compliance is ensured. More on the policies. Policies direct decisions and behavior. They are stronger forms of guidance than just guidelines. They have less scope for creativity than guidelines, of course. Failure to follow policy may result in disciplinary action. They prevent undesirable outcomes or cause a desirable outcome sometimes. For example, a policy could be a zero defect product. So that can create desirable outcomes. Organizational governance should decide which policies are appropriate in specific circumstances. If you look at that policy of external websites, certain external websites not allowed, that is to prevent undesirable outcomes, and that may be appropriate in specific circumstances. For example, in working at a client site, a policy may be not to browse the internet. Only intranet browsing is allowed. Yeah? Or maybe, well, at a client side, you definitely need an internet. If I'm a provider's person sitting at a client site, I may need internet. So such policies should be carefully worked out. Anyone can define policy in their scope of control. This must align with organizational policy. Meaning, if the organization has a policy that zero defect product, then teams should also align their policies with that. A team may say that because organization wants zero defect, I would use the specific methodology, or I may procure machinery, computer systems, etc. only from a certain supplier. Otherwise, I may end up in defects. Policies must not conflict with each other. Look at the example of the internet, certain websites not being allowed. But let us say there is another policy that all research and development should consider external industry happenings. Then how can the person go to the internet? Because on one hand, internet is not allowed. On the other hand, another policy says, be aware of the industry happenings. We need the internet. So such conflict should not happen. Okay, continuing on controls. Controls are countermeasures or safeguards that provide assurance that objectives will be achieved and undesired events will be prevented or detected and corrected. Controls require evidence of their effectiveness. Yes, for example, an evidence of a monthly report having been sent as per regulatory requirements, or an evidence of ISO 20000 having been implemented by conducting an audit. And the auditor may ask for several evidences related to ISO 27000, ISMS. Controls require evidence of their effectiveness. Some controls are policies. This is interesting, isn't it? Now we say some controls are policies. An example. Let us say there is a policy that system monitoring should include alerting the system owner whenever certain limits are breached. Yeah? So that's the policy, that alert the owner when certain limits are breached. So this policy is a type of control also. It is a procedural type of control, because it is a safeguard. Having such a policy helps to control. So it's a safeguard. Continuing, controls should be sufficient to achieve the required result without introducing consequences that are unacceptable to the organization. Yes, there should not be too much of uh, uh, work to be done within a control. Otherwise, people may try to bypass them also. That's another problem with too much control. Example of another control could be a security check at the gate. The policy may be that mobile phones with cameras are not allowed in a company to come inside with. That's the policy. But how do we control that? By putting the checking at the gate and asking people, are you carrying phones which have cameras? Yeah? I remember this when I worked for a bank. But then these things cause additional work. Yeah? Policies and controls create a lot more additional work. Therefore, one should be careful. So those who are in the DPI role should be careful about how much control they are establishing and what are the policies they are enforcing, and that the policies do not conflict. Therefore, it is better to give some guidelines also. While there are policy, certain guidelines may be helping in certain situations when a policy cannot be fully enforced. Guidelines. Guidelines are not requirements, they are recommendations to guide people making decisions or performing activities. They are weaker forms of guidance than policies. They have more scope for creativity than policies. It is about how to act in a specific situation or how to achieve a desired result. Used when no specific policy applies, organization does not want to direct behavior in a forceful way, and people may need assistance or are unsure how to do something or what to do. This is when guidances are useful. People may be given guidance to give them some sort of direction without enforcing something so that they may progress forward. For example, as a trainer, I may be having some trainer guidelines from the training company. And in a product testing, or before the product is given out to a customer, there may be some product review guidelines. For people to do programming, there may be some programming guidelines. So there are no policies, but these are guidelines which can help people how to program. For example, guidelines which can help to make the software more robust and reliable, which can prevent security attacks into the software. But sometimes there may be policies that specific way of programming should be done to enforce certain security mechanisms. Yeah? So that's the difference between guideline and policy. Let us practice some more questions on the learning so far. Number 25. What is required in an operating model? A clear picture of how value is co-created, clear policies and procedures for daily operations, measures and reports to demonstrate performance, description of how the organization runs itself. You need to pick up 2 of the 4 to define the operating model. The question is about the operating model. A clear picture of how value is co-created. This is indeed part of the definition. Clear policies and procedures for daily operations. These are not required in an operating model. Measures and reports to demonstrate performance are also not required as part of an operating model. 4 is applicable. Description of how the organization runs itself. Because an operating model is a conceptual or visual representation of how an organization co-creates value, which is number 1, with its customers and other stakeholders, and as well as how the organization runs itself, number 4. So, which means D is the correct answer. Yes, let us try number 19. Which best describes a mission statement? A short statement of organizational challenges and ideas to overcome these challenges. A short statement of how the organization will adopt new practices in the future. A short statement of the overall purpose and intentions of the organization. A set of key performance indicators that must be achieved for the organization to be successful. Okay, let us analyze the answer. Option A is incorrect. Short statement of organizational challenges and ideas to overcome these challenges. B is also incorrect. How the organization will adopt new practices. C is correct. A short statement of the overall purpose and intentions. So it's a mission statement is a short but complete description of the overall purpose and intentions of an organization, which means it will define or state, specify what is to be achieved, and generally not how it is to be done. So though I might have mentioned in my example how it is done, but generally the overall purpose. D, a set of key performance indicators that must be achieved. That is also incorrect because it is a way of measuring performance as compared to an objective. So D is also incorrect. Another question, number 12. Which concept best ensures that activities are carried out following agreed standards or guidelines? Governance, management, improvement, compliance. The question is about ensuring that activities are carried out following certain agreed standards, guidelines, meaning policies as well. Governance is defined as the means by which an organization is directed and controlled. That is a simple one-line definition of governance. The means of direction and control. But the question is ensuring that the activities are carried out. So governance will be incorrect. Uh, Management is the set of coordinated activities to define, control, supervise, and improve something. So yeah, that is a little easier to eliminate. Improvement is a deliberately introduced change. Therefore, this is also not improvement. This deliberately introduced change results in increased value for one or more stakeholders. Whereas compliance is the only one left, and that should be correct because compliance is two things. The act of ensuring that the standard or guideline is followed and also the result of ensuring it. Yeah? Or that certain accounting practices like SOX or compliance practices are being employed. Yeah? So both the, sometimes we will use the term that we are doing compliance. So that's taking action. And we will say we are compliant, which means that is the result of being compliant. So both the. So ensuring that activities are carried out as per agreed standard, though compliance is part of governance, but governance is not just this part. Governance is beyond compliance. That's why D is very specific. A is much wider definition for the situation. Yeah? Governance is the means by which an organization is directed and controlled using controls, policies, compliance, etc., guidelines, etc. Let us now try question number 20. Which best describes the difference between a policy and a guideline? Larger, more mature organizations often use policies, but modern organizations often rely more on guidelines. Guidelines are simplified policies that are easier to follow because they do not recommend specific procedures. Policies are used when there are external regulatory requirements, but guidelines are used for internal requirements. D. Policies are formal statements of management expectation, but guidelines are recommended ways of work. Option A is incorrect. More mature organizations use policies, but modern organizations rely on guidelines. Guidelines are simplified policies. That is also not true. Policies are used for external, whereas guidelines for internal. This is also incorrect. And the correct one is the last statement. Policies are formal statements of management expectations, but guidelines are recommended way of work. Yes, so that's because a policy contains the formally documented expectations of management and their intentions, which is used to direct decisions and activities. Adherence to policy is always mandatory. And guidelines will guide employees as they perform certain activities or make certain decisions. So guidelines are general recommendations on how to act in different situations or how to do something to achieve some result. Sometimes guidelines are used where there is no policy applicable or where the organization doesn't want to enforce some behavior or want to dictate behavior, but they want to assist the people who are unsure about how to do something. That is when guidelines can be used. So that's Next topic is to understand concepts of value, outcomes, cost, and risks. You might recollect that these are covered at the foundation level, so this should be already known to you. And also we will look at the relationships to direction, planning, and improvement. Value, the perceived benefits, usefulness, and importance of something. Output, a result for a stakeholder enabled by one or more outputs. Outcome is a result for a stakeholder enabled by one or more outputs. Cost, the amount of money spent on a specific activity or resource. Risk, a possible event that could cause harm or loss or make it more difficult to achieve objectives, can also be defined as uncertainty of outcome. A service is a means of enabling value co-creation by facilitating outcomes that customers want to achieve without the customer having to manage specific costs and risks. Services support outcomes while managing some costs and risks. So that is what we see on the right side here. Service relationship introduce new costs and risks and can have a negative effect on some outcomes. That is what we see on the left. Negative effect, cost introduced, risk introduced. Organizations accept some cost and risks to create value. Organization meaning the provider as well as the consumer. Direction planning and improvement activities may focus on any or all of the outcomes, cost, risks, and value. So direction planning improvement may be for some of the outcomes, some of the risks, and regarding the value co-creation. An example of value could be a passenger wants to reach a destination conveniently by hiring a cab. An output is the mobile application. Using the mobile application, the customer may achieve their outcome of reaching their destination conveniently. Negative impact on outcomes, an example could be maybe a transaction system, a credit card system is unavailable and may lead to loss of transactions. A risk could be the mobile phone does not work for the passenger, or the driver is new to the city and drives slowly. I once had this experience when I booked a cab and the driver said that he is new to the city and I was going to the airport. It took me double the time to go to the airport because he was asking me for directions. Though the map was there in his automobile, I just kept patient, but was not a good situation because fortunately I had a lot of time, so I was okay. Yeah, let's practice a couple of questions on the learnings in this subsection. Number 15, which statement about value, outcome, cost, and risk is correct when directing, planning, or improving a service? Removing risks from the customer is the primary objective of a service. Cost introduced by the service should be equal to the cost removed from the consumer. Value cannot be achieved by accepting additional risks. Value can be created by accepting additional costs. Which statement is correct about these? Removing risk is the primary objective. In a service, there are more than risk as an objective. It is also the cost. And risk may not be the primary objective. Cost is also associated as an objective of a service. Yeah? Risks and cost. The customer would like to pass on the cost and risks to the provider, while the provider may introduce cost and risks. Cost introduced by the service should be equal to the cost removed from the consumer. This is a little odd. It is not necessary always. A balance may be very good, but need not be equal always. Yeah? Because it is a business which will determine the balance based on the need and based on the value. Because there is always cost associated, the cost of resources and some risks with the outcomes to be generated. And therefore, and because the provider is going to accept some of the costs and risks, therefore, it is not always true that B is correct. Option C, value cannot be achieved by accepting additional risks, but not necessarily always. Sometimes, and this is an interesting statement actually, that C is incorrect. Sometimes an organization may choose to accept additional risk and more cost or even less outcomes as long as they think that the future value eventually will be created. Or it may increase the value, the current value, by taking the additional risk. In fact, organizations will take risks to achieve value, though they may try to mitigate those risks, and the risks may occur and may diminish the value, diminish the outcome, but eventually the value may surface. For example, using a new technology like artificial intelligence may introduce a lot of risk, but the company may go ahead and accept it if they think that the rewards are going to be good eventually. Therefore, value can be achieved by accepting additional risks. But therefore, last one seems to be correct automatically. Value can be created by accepting additional cost. We already know that risk and cost are two elements of creating value. And so additional increased cost may lead to more value. And this is where the service provider may pass on that increased cost to recover from the customer, as long as there is an available customer. And in the same example of using a new technology, may introduce more risk and may introduce cost as well, but the service provider may use some economy of scale and may not pass on the cost to the customer. Because this was a tricky question, here is a hint for you. Note that certain words which can tell us that the answer is incorrect. So words like primary, should be or must be, never, always, cannot, will be. Watch out for those words. They are most likely the incorrect answers, but do them with caution. Sometimes it could be a correct answer, but in most cases, such words which are enforcing something, because ITIL is not a mandate, ITIL is a guidance. Whereas if you look at option D, can be, value can be created rather than is the primary or should be or cannot be or must be. Therefore, even if the answer is not clear, you could go for D. So that's how we can take advantage of such phrases in the exam to come to the correct answer. Another question for us, number 40. When would it be most appropriate for an organization to accept additional risks, increased cost or diminished outcomes? When it creates the possibility of increased value, when implementing a new artificial intelligence solution, when directed to by the GRC function, governance, risk and compliance, or when collecting data as a part of maturity assessment. Okay, in this case, the correct answer A is when it creates the possibility of increased value. That seems to be correct because an organization may sometimes choose to accept additional risks or more cost or less outcomes if doing so will create the possibility of increased value eventually. And not when implementing a new AI solution. An AI solution is just one technology. So the technology doesn't really matter about when to accept additional risks and in order to create more value. GRC, while GRC is important, the management teams, the auditors, the governing body should be able to translate the strategy into the direction like plans, policies, controls, and guidances. And then they should also monitor and measure the compliance. But still, an organization may choose more risk, cost, or less outcomes if it creates the possibility of more value. And lastly, collecting data as part of maturity assessment. Though maturity assessment does collect data, and the maturity assessment is an estimation of the maturity of a process or some framework, such as the ITIL process maturity or a project management process maturity, but they can still choose additional risks, more cost or less outcomes, if doing so will create a possibility of more value. And when they measure it, they will see that it can bring in more value. Yes. So for example, automation may bring in some risks, but if they plan properly, those risks can be reduced and they may eventually get value. The risk could be that they may have to put in more effort and eventually the automation may not bring satisfaction. So they will take the risk. And that brings us to the end of section 1, where we covered the various concepts of direct plan and improve. Note that the section 1 is worth about 8 marks in the exam out of the 40 marks. Thank you.